Hello students, Mr. Yun here, Chapter 5, Lesson 2, Part 2. Let's start by talking about the pyramids. So, the pharaohs of old, being the sons of gods and all that, were afforded what we may call special burial arrangements. Their mummies were placed in pyramids with their worldly belongings, and the pyramids protected them from animals, bad weather, and people. Like a fortress. How the heck were they built, though? These things are huge. Well, it took years and years and years of hard labor. Workers would find a big rock somewhere in the Nile River Valley. It would be chiseled into a block. Then the block would get attached to ropes and dragged to the river on a path of logs, so it would roll right along. It was then sent downriver on a barge. It would get unloaded and pushed or pulled on a ramp to be put in place. Sounds crazy, right? I wouldn't have wanted to be on the block dragging team. Right there. One can argue that those pyramids aren't sturdy, though, as they are still standing today. Now, the building of the pyramids necessitated certain advancements. For example, all the pyramids' entrances face north. So they obviously had learned the cardinal directions, your north, south, east, and west. And they had explored astronomy, which led to a 12-month calendar. So that's pretty cool. They also advanced their geometry and mathematical skills because, well, you can't really build without math, measurements and all that. Now, the largest of the pyramids is called the Great Pyramid. It was built for King Khufu somewhere in the mid-2000s BC. For 4,000 years, it stood as the tallest structure in the world, which is pretty amazing. Each block weighed 2.5 tons. That is pretty heavy. There you go. See, there's the Statue of Liberty. It's even bigger. Now, let's move into the daily life of our ancient Egyptians. At the peak of ancient Egypt, it was home to about 5 million people. Almost everyone lived in either the Nile River Valley or the Nile River Delta. Even though that area is only about 3% of Egypt, it's still like that today. Pretty much everyone lives by the Nile River, because the rest of it's just desert. Now, Egypt had a social structure much like Mesopotamia. It was at the top you had the pharaoh. Under him was the nobles and priests. You can see here with this nice graphic. Next came your scribes, merchants, and shopkeepers. The largest class was the farmers and unskilled workers. Farmers and herders, as it says here. And underneath, yep, there we have unskilled workers, unskilled labor. But an interesting point of the Egyptian social structure is that with hard work, one could actually improve their status. We call that upward mobility. So you weren't necessarily stuck where you were at. Like, you couldn't be pharaoh, but an unskilled worker could become a farmer or herder could become a shopkeeper, and so on and so forth. Now, the rich folk lived in houses made of wood and mud bricks. Sometimes they had multi-floor homes with many rooms and even a courtyard. It's pretty sweet digs. The men and women of the upper class wore fancy white linens and used what we might call mascara to darken around their eyes. Now, the middle class had nice things too, but wore simpler clothes and had smaller houses. Your average Joe farmer typically lived in a one-room hut with a roof made of reeds. They worked the land of a noble and paid a portion of their crops as rent. Now, the family unit, which we talk about the family unit in many civilizations, and it's very important in all of them. The family unit was important in Egypt, as it always is. Even the gods lived in family units. Egyptian women actually had similar legal status as men, so that's pretty cool. Some held high offices such as priestess. Most kids did not receive an education, but rather took on the roles of their father. Daughters often learned to take care of the household as their mothers did. So if your mother was a well-to-do housewife, you were a girl, you'd be raised to be a well-to-do housewife. If your father was you were a boy and your father was a merchant, then you would be trained to be a merchant, so on and so forth. Wives of farmers typically worked the fields alongside their husbands, however. So we're talking about the farmer class now. Teenagers were expected to get married and start their own families, so pretty high expectations on teenagers. Once a father and mother were too sick and old to work, it was the job of the oldest son or daughter to take care of them. So family is very important. We're talking about, multi-generational homes here. Now, that's the end of this part 2 lesson. Let's bump over to our assignment, written submission. For today's assignment, I have a bit of a challenge for you. We're advanced after all. I want you to use complete sentences to tell me 2 similarities and 1 difference you have found between ancient Egypt and Mesopotamia. So we're doing comparison between the Egyptians from this chapter and the Mesopotamians from the previous chapter. Please answer in paragraph form. This requires you to use some higher thinking. We've got to do our compare-contrast skills, but you can do it. Don't forget, you can always just look back on Mesopotamia in the last chapter if you have to. Here's your grading breakdown. So be sure to give me 2 similarities, 1 difference. Check your punctuation, your spelling, and your grammar. Paragraph form, that's it. So you're making some comparisons between Egypt and Mesopotamia. That's what we got. There's plenty of wiggle room there. It's 10 points. That's it for today. If you have any questions, please let me know. Otherwise, hey, have a good one, all right?